was it easier to be a Christian back when the people were atheists and agnostics and like didn't go into the supernatural, or is this a better time to evangelize or to be a Christian? Like, I'm so confused. Like, was it that easier to be a Christian in the 1950s, 60s, or like, I don't understand. Like, from your perspective and from history.
Well, first of all, I'm not that old. Man.
I think Doug was born like a year or two before me. It's time for the Strange O'Clock podcast, where you get to hear strange news with Christian views. Pastor Doug, welcome. Thank you so much for carving out time to spend with us.
Great to be on here with you guys.
We're honored to have you, Pastor Doug. Pastor Doug, so I want to introduce everybody to you. Actually, I'll let them introduce themselves to you. So we all know who you are, Pastor Doug, but you don't know who we are. So we'll start off. So really quickly, everybody, just kind of give us a nutshell about your podcast and who you are. So Lindsay, again, we'll start off with you, then we'll go to Brandon and the others.
Hey, I'm Lindsay Waters, live in Mississippi. Me and Brandon have the Unrefined podcast. Me and Brandon would just have really great conversations. And Brandon was like, we should record these conversations. And then his wife, Sandy, said, why don't y'all just make it into y'all's conversations into a podcast? And we kind of went from there. And I think the first one was about stairs in the woods. And like most first podcasts, it was probably kind of rough, but it was really fun.
Oh, that was good. I liked it.
Yeah, thank you. And we
liked it too.
Blowing and going since then. So, yeah.
Hey, Doug, Kenny C. I have a program called The Rock with Kenny C. I'm a music teacher and just starting to get into podcasting and doing some things like that. Big fan, read a lot of your books. I think we have very similar tastes and stuff. I really loved the last book with your conspiracy theory, and you're talking about how you came across Michael Heiser, and that was a lot for me too. Was a lot. Reading that just felt like I was like, okay, this is me. This is the same thing. It got me. Heiser kind of got me down the pipe on things and stuff like that. So I'm glad he did. He turned myself. I've got about 3 or 4 of your books that I've read, and I enjoy your stuff a lot, man.
Yeah, I just saw you today. I was watching your video from the Defender Conference, Kenny.
Oh, cool. Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. It's been, it's been a crazy year and getting some opportunities. And I kept asking them, they asked me to do another one in April. And I was like, man, I was for sure I was a one and done. I was like, I think they're going to see what I did and be like, dude, we don't know. But they said that they liked it. So I love Skywatch and all those people. I'm hoping Judd might pop in here a little bit. I talked to him just a little bit ago. So
that'd be great. He joins us.
Yeah, I hope so.
Awesome. Great. Michael Enoch Petras.
Hey, how's it going? So I have a podcast called, not a podcast. I have a channel called The Rundown of Our Reality, where I talk about, just basically what's coming, what's coming in the end, and break down. I ran for MP and member of Parliament in Calgary Centre. I studied government finance for over a decade, not in schools, on my own, so I actually know how money works. And so I show that. And you should check it out. You'll really like the Nephilim Rephaim. I talk about something that nobody has talked about or put together yet in how the Rephaim came. It's the whole chessboard video series, and it's not like a 2-hour series. Each one is like maybe 5 or 10 minutes that just talk about it. And if people want to know more, then there's a library that I built that they can research for themselves. And then I joined a new podcast with Dr. Judd Burton, called the Camp Hermon, and we're having a lot of fun with that. I'm going to help him build his new school, or revamp his school, not new, but anyway, his school of anthropology. I'm his editor there, and yeah, I'm excited to. I've listened to a few of your podcasts. I haven't got a contract. I'm an editor. I haven't got a contract since just before COVID, so I can't afford to buy any books. So I became a Christian in mid 2020. So I haven't read too much of what you've done, but I've listened to a lot of your podcasts, and yeah, they're definitely down my angle as well. Where I've gone, like listening to you, it's like exactly what I'm thinking. So it's quite fun to see that I'm going down the right path, right? Like you have two witnesses there, right? And two witnesses kind of make it truth for you. Anyway, yeah, I'm done talking. Okay.
That's great. Michael Peters has excellent videos. He's our Canadian friend. So glad that your video and audio is coming in clearly. All right. And so we've got Nick Dodson, and he's the one where it says iPhone 59.
Yep. Sorry about that. I probably should put my name there. My bad. Nice to meet you. I'm actually a newbie. Michael Heiser has been a huge part of my journey. He didn't lead me into the Lord, but I feel like I got born again when I started understanding what's a Nephilim, what's the Book of Enoch, why am I not learning this in mainstream Christianity? So very awesome. Happy to meet you. I'm more of a TikToker. God's been able to bless me, and I'd love to, I'm just going to throw my name out there. I'm not an expert on a lot of things, but I'm a learner. I'm a quick learner. I think I'm the Nephilim or whatever. I just go down that rabbit hole as fast as I can. Cause I'm like, wow, what is this? Why did I not know this before? So I'm throwing my name out there. If anybody wants new blood and newer people with different perspectives, and I'm always open to coming on anybody's show, and I think that's what I'm gonna do. I would love to start a podcast, but to be honest with you, everybody's saying, there's so many good podcasts out there, and I just want to kind of help grow as much as I can other people's podcasts even before I even make my own. So it's nice meeting you, and excited for this opportunity.
You show us about TikTok, Nick, and we'll show you about podcasting. That's great. And Paul?
Hey, nice to meet you. I guess I don't have a podcast just yet.
Not yet.
I've got a couple people working on me to either start something or join on theirs, or guest or whatever. So I guess the way I got into this was I started with Skiba talking about giants and stuff like that, and branched into Pounders and Carico with some of their stuff, and they introduced me to Mike Heiser, and it's just been a wild ride the last 3 years.
And Paul, what books? You're reading one of his Doug's books, right?
The Waters of Creation. I started.
Oh wow!
I'm excited about that. I'm curious to see where you go with that. And
yeah, that was my first one. So
it seems like it's a great topic, just based on what I picked up off of the Gilberts and Heiser and stuff, with the kind of that, and even some of the Pounder stuff, the prehistory and the creation stuff that I don't think the church deals with very much.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, even though he's not podcasting yet, we're excited that he's going to be a guest on my show eventually. I've been tempted to actually just record without him knowing that I was recording him, because he has a lot of knowledge, biblical knowledge. He's a mutual friend of my husband and I's when he used to live in Florida, but now he's in Chicago. And Michael Basham.
Great honor to meet you, sir. Huge fan since the Paranormal days, and just really thankful for your work and helping to guide and steer this narrative. I'm the grandson of Don Basham. My uncle runs Derek Prince Ministries over in Charlotte nearby, and I've just done world mission work around Asia and Chinese, Japanese, kind of perusing around that part of the world, and we're entering this new mission field of podcasting. And I help Johnny McMahon with the Fringe Radio Network. We may have contacted you before to get Pure Normal on there, and any other podcasts that you're working with, we're interested in getting those out through Fringe Radio Network, kind of coming from the old days of, you know, Dr. Future, Future Quake, and all those fun days when this information was just coming out into the internet in the early 2010s. So I think this is a really interesting opportunity to bring your work to the next generation. We're looking at Nick's giant TikTok following and all these different people that haven't heard about this yet. And I go on TikTok and I see a lot of the things that you've done just trickling out into this new generation. So that really excites me. I'm really interested in disciple winning, soul winning. So yeah, great to meet you. And we'll try to navigate. You have 10 podcasters on your tail here. So we'll try not to talk over you too much here. We'll try to referee. I'll try to referee a little bit so you can actually say something.
And
thank you.
Thank you so much, Pastor Doug, for coming on board our group podcast. We want to actually do this once a month, and I thought, who would be the next honored guest? Pastor Doug-van-Dorn. I've been a fan since I got involved with Blurry Creatures. So in the Blurry Creatures members chat, and then of course I started listening to Derek Gilbert on his Iron and Myth with you and Dr. Judd, and I thought, oh gosh, I definitely needed to ask him to be a guest on our show. Michael Basham and I actually have a podcast called Strange O'Clock Podcast. But he started podcasting in 2016 and I did in 2015. And so in a nutshell, I had gone through different names. The first name was Deception Detection Radio with Kay Carswell and I, but Kay Carswell has passed and she went to be with the Lord. And then I was on my own, and then I was under Paratruth Radio Network, and then on my own once again. And December of 21 is when I reached out to Michael Basham, because he had messaged me a few years ago and said, hey, why don't we do a show together? And I thought, I really felt the Lord was guiding me in this direction, because he actually, and I jokingly but realistically say that he's actually more Asian than me. He's more Asian on the inside, but obviously white on the outside. And I'm probably the opposite, because I was actually born and raised in Northern California. I'm sorry, born in Southern California. When I was 8, I moved to Northern California. My dad and my late mom were immigrants from Thailand, and my dad's an architect, and he moved my late mom and him to Southern California, rather, LA. And then I came along, and but I became a Christian when I was 16, and I have been listening to podcasts probably since 2014 or so, and then probably you, Pastor Doug, since probably like 3 years ago, I think. And I started reading Giants, Sons of the Gods, and it's an excellent book. And I had listened to a bunch of your podcasts with Blurry Creatures and other people and what have you, all the way up until I got on this show with these fine gentlemen here. So Pastor Doug, once again, thank you so much. And so I thought that maybe it'd be great for you, Pastor Doug, to share about your background, even though we know a little bit or a lot of bit about your background, but it'd be great to have you share your research and what led you to where you are today.
Yeah, sure. Well, great to be on your show and to be able to meet all you guys. And work you're doing is spread the news. You know, Mike's not doing well, and we don't know how much longer he's going to be with us. And he's kind of been talking about how, you know, he wants people to carry the torch for him when he's gone. So I mean, I know that's going to happen, and there's kind of evidence of it just right here in this room. So it's pretty amazing to see how he's affected all of us.
Oh yeah.
Yes, definitely. He's in our thoughts and prayers for sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know how much you want to know, how far back you want to go, just into this kind of
whatever
space,
you feel
or
comfortable with. Whatever you feel comfortable with. It's up to you.
Well, I've been, I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. I born and raised in Colorado, went to college in St. Paul, Minnesota, where I met my wife. I was a business major. had a Bible minor. When I got out of school, I couldn't find any work except for one job, which was a youth pastor. So I did that just because I had volunteered in youth groups before. I had no plan on being a pastor at all. And that lasted for about 4 years. I ended up going to seminary to kind of delay growing up, I guess. And even going to seminary, I had no desire to really be a pastor or anything like that. It just wasn't on my radar at all. And then when I had graduated from Denver Seminary here, the kind of church that we were looking for, there just wasn't any around here. And so we said, well, I wonder if we could start one. So we did. And 21 years later, I'm still at that same church. So that's how I got into the pastorate. It was almost kind of just a need that was filled. And I'm like, well, I guess I'm kind of able to do the job. And so God's blessed us for that. And great church, love it. And as I preach the books of the Bible, so I'll kind of tell you how I got into this space and just going through different books. And this was probably 12 years ago, I guess, maybe 13. And I'm in the book of Exodus. And I think this is a story, Kenny, that I tell a little bit in the conspiracy theory. I don't know how detailed I go into it, but I was studying for something in Exodus. I came across this crazy paper on Deuteronomy 32:8 in this textual variant on the sons of God or the sons of Israel. And I was like, man, that's so interesting. But it had nothing to do with what I was talking about. So a couple months later, I'm doing more research on the internet, on my sermon, came across something else that reminded me totally of that paper. And I'm like, what in the world? It couldn't possibly be the same guy. So I looked it up, same guy. And of course, it's Michael Heiser. And at that point in time, the only people that ever knew him were guys at UFO conferences or Coast to Coast Radio.
Yep.
And he was doing kind of the early version of his Unseen Realm called The Myth That Is True. And he was put that out for free. And so I just devoured that. And, I know nobody in my circles that's talking about this kind of stuff that's in that book. And I had no friends to talk to about it. So I just kind of started writing. And the first book I wrote was almost like plagiarism of his book. And I wasn't trying to do anything with it. I was just trying to think through the issues,
Right.
And then about halfway through that, I'm like, I don't think he's done everything you can do on giants. So and there was like 2 or 3 books on giants out at the time. Steve Quill had his gigantic book on giants out and a couple others, but there wasn't much. So I thought this could be something that, could be fun for people and see what happens with it. So that's how I ended up writing that book. It was mostly me thinking through issues for myself so I could try to understand it. And then that helped me to kind of begin teaching on the topic in a church, which is always interesting when it's conservative and reformed church. So,
yes.
But it went really well. Never really had a whole lot of problems doing it. I think I was wise enough to kind of figure out how you can do it in a way that won't completely freak people out. In the process of doing that, I ended up writing a catechism. So the catechesis is something that we do in our tradition quite a bit, teach our kids questions and answers of the faith. And I'm like, no, nobody's ever written a supernatural catechism before. So I decided to try that. And on a whim, the only way I had ever known Mike was through his blog and just, writing messages back to him. I think we had interacted maybe 2 or 3 times. And I said, I wonder what would happen if I sent him this catechism, what he would think about it. So I sent it to him and, within 30 minutes, I get an answer back, which is unheard of for that guy. He goes, man, I totally want to publish this. I'm like, seriously? So he edited it up and put it into the form that it became for the Q&A companion for his Unseen Realm. So that was just, that was pretty amazing day for me. Yep, that's it. That's it, Kenny. So,
that's awesome.
We've had him out a couple times and had him teach for us and it's opened up so many opportunities and doors for me that I'm just really thankful for it.
That's awesome, Pastor Doug. So similar, but yet different from our interview with William Ramsey, I just thought that you all, as you feel comfortable, just ask Pastor Doug a question and then the next person. But I'm not going to call on people like I did last time because I don't want to be controlling or anything like that.
Unless
So
you raise your little hands.
right, raise your hand or whatever. So who wants to go first? And, but you all can just take the helm and just sail with it. I don't want to call on people.
I got
have
one.
a question.
Oh,
You first.
go ahead.
You first,
No,
sir.
are you sure?
Yeah, you go,
All
man.
right, cool. All right, so my question is like, how do you use this information, like the Nephilim, like all these like things that we're talking about with evangelism? Because I've used it with, I heard multiple people came from cults, so I witnessed the Mormons a lot. I sat down for about 4.5 hours with some Mormon missionaries. I met with over 200 missionaries, and I bring up actually what you just talked about with the, they use the King James, so like as you know, it's a textual variant. So like I explained like the difference between the sons of like Israel, like the bad translation and the real sons of God. And, like, yeah, they're not from actual planets. Like God created these things, like, and explain like the Deuteronomy 32 worldview and everything. And then I'm like, I'm spitting game, and they're just sitting back like, what? Like this is insane. So like I don't know if that's good. I don't know if you recommend it, but like kind of share that a little bit about with just evangelism and how do you use it, because I understand with the fringe. And then real quick, with the other story is, I don't know if I'll be able to speak again, but the other story is my buddy smokes weed all the time. I've been trying to share the gospel with him for years, like really bad guy. But I literally tell him about this. I tell him Michael Heiser stuff. He's hooked, and he's reading the Bible constantly. And like I couldn't get him to read the Bible if I tried. And then and he has like giants and then like demons and like what? So like I don't know, just wanted to share that and then just ask like, how do you deal with that? Would you recommend it? Like, hi, my name's Nick. Like, did you know about the Nephilim? I don't know if you should probably come out and say that, but I don't know. What's your thoughts on everything?
Great question, Nick. I mean, I kind of look at it with two different groups. You can have unbelievers and you can have Christians, and they both are kind of totally uneducated in this. In some ways, there's a certain segment of unbelievers that have an easier connection to it than Christians do. I think maybe that's what your friend is kind of experiencing, especially with like how quickly kind of the supernatural craziness of the ancient world is making its way back into our culture. I heard a while back that for the first time in 1,000 years, Iceland has a church to Thor. So like they're actually, or Odin, one of the two, like Odin worship is back, and that's crazy. And so just helping people see that when that are not Christians, that if you can connect with them on a supernatural level, if they've got any kind of connection to that at all, ghost stories, demon stories, you'd be so surprised at how many people have those kind of stories, and then using that as a way to kind of get in with them. I mean, what I did with my book and what I wanted to do with it was to not get into sensationalism and not get into future speculation, but to really ground people in a biblical theology of the giants, as strange as that sounds, because I really thought that there was something there, and I still do. And just to get them to see that the beginning of this thing is Genesis 3:15, which has always been called the first gospel. I mean, God's going to crush the head of the serpent. He's going to go after the head of the seed of the woman. And so there's this battle of these seeds. And what in the world does that mean? Well, you can look at it spiritually, like the Pharisees are called the sons of the devil, but also there's a physical seed, and that's what that whole storyline is all about. And then taking them in, what I would want to do with an unbeliever is take them to the foot of the cross and let them see that, look, Jesus dealt with this. It's over. He won the victory. And don't go any farther with it, because they don't need that at that point in time. They don't need the speculation. They need to be brought low with their own sinfulness and how the Lord can save them from that, and how he can save them from the slavery and imprisonment that they are by nature to the devil. So Christians are a little different. I think we've become not totally, but almost totally naturalized, infected by evolution and Darwinism and naturalism, and we don't even realize it. materialism, rationalism, and all these things that came by 2 centuries ago. We hold ourselves up, especially conservative Christians, like, hey, we're above that. And then when you start talking about anything supernatural, it's like, that's not real. It doesn't make any sense. So that you have to be a little more ginger, I think, in the way that you approach Christians with this topic.
Mm-hmm.
But as Marty McFly said in Back to the Future, he's like, maybe you guys aren't ready for this yet, but your kids are gonna love it. That's how I look at this. There's a new generation rising, and they're so hungry for reality. And we've dropped the ball as the conservative church. Now look at the transgenders, look at the things that are going on with the teenagers. Where do you see going forward this realm that you've built, just collaborating with so many different people in this fringe Christian network of people, especially Michael Heiser, as Canary Car Radio calls him Gandalf, because he's the only guy to go.
Gandalf, so.
He's sorry?
He calls himself Gandalf.
Oh, right. Okay, then.
His mission is a mission to Middle Earth.
And that being, for those of you listening, that there's the kind of the scholars of Christendom that kind of poo-poo us podcasters and silly conspiracy theories, but then Michael Heiser, Dr. Michael Heiser, is the only guy to actually go and visit Middle Earth and bring between the two worlds. Where do you see this going forward? Because you've been here, you've been in this for, it's been almost a decade now in this whole realm of and that's like twice or triple the amount of years. We call internet years are they're much longer years, to quote Lord of the Rings Bilbo, spread too little butter over too much bread. And but where do you see this going forward as far as the actual message? I'm very curious to see how just the word Nephilim translates into this era now, where we have whatever with the vaccines and all this terrible stuff that's coming out with AI. And how do you see this moving forward in your mind?
Yeah, man. I've thought a lot about it. I have some worries about it. And it goes back to the reason I wrote the book in the first place. My worries are that this is an exciting topic and it's a really fun one to speculate on. And we're living in insane times. And that makes it all the easier to speculate on things. And
right,
I mean, everybody's talking about the return of the Nephilim, and they're under these caves in the earth, and they're going to come out, and people are remaking them, and they're in stasis with rings around their arms. I mean, all these kinds of things are out there.
Right.
And so I grew up in that whole world. I mean, 30, 40 years ago, of Jesus is coming back this year, Jesus is coming back the next year, Jesus is coming back the next year. And I just, one of the things that I've appreciated about Mike so much is that he doesn't play those games with eschatology, and he doesn't care who knows it. It's like, we need to be grounded in the text. We need to make sure that we're not saying things that go beyond the text. And when we do that, then I think that this can be a great avenue to help people think in so many ways. But I worry that it could get out of control just because there's so much interest in it, and then people get really excited about it, like they do anything when they first get excited, and they're not trained in it. They don't know what they're talking about, and they just kind of go off, and who knows what happens. So I just, I hope and pray that doesn't happen with it, but I could see it happening pretty easy. If it doesn't, the other direction, if there's some sanity to it, and people stay grounded in the scripture with it, I think it can be like, I've wondered this question. So, like, why was the whole divine council worldview like lost for so many centuries? It's not like it didn't exist. It's like it was just lost. Yeah. What in the world happened? And then the other question is, why now? Why is God bringing it back now, like in mass? I really wonder about that. And if we're living near the very end, I have absolutely no idea. Whether we are or whether we aren't, I think it's completely irrelevant to a world that's becoming pagan again, the post-Christian world that we're living in, for people to understand that whole side of heavenly rulership, principalities, thrones, dominions, all that kind of stuff. What it's talking about, how it is that it affects us, impacts us. The early church was dealing with this kind of stuff all the time because they lived in a pagan culture. And we've been, we're kind of re-entering a pagan culture. So if we have the tools to be able to deal with that, this can be very effective, very, very helpful for people. So I can see it going one of two ways.
Brilliant answer. Thank you so much. Does anyone else want to continue in questioning our wizard here that is going to bring us?
I'm probably more like Rattergast, I suppose.
No. Although the number of mountains that you've climbed, we've got to pull up those pictures for the edit, because that is very Lord of the Rings-esque. But these are very Lord of the Rings times, so I appreciate putting up with us. And please, gentlemen.
Curious if Doug has any thoughts on the church, particularly what you're saying with the kind of the loss of the supernatural. I see that there seems to be like a working that was done by Weishaupt back in the day to steal the supernatural and replace it with the material. And there seems to be another one going on right now where the globalists are taking away the material and they're going to replace that with some new, probably an antichrist religion. But like, how do we get that back? And how do we get this back into the churches? And how do we get the churches to wake up?
I think I have a deeper question than that, Paul. I mean, I have great concern for the church. I mean, I'm a pastor. It's what I've been doing for 20 years. And, I come out of the Reformation where they were deeply concerned about Christ's church. And, the ancient heresy that the first Christians were dealing with all the time was Gnosticism. And Gnosticism is like this hatred of the material world. Put it as quickly as you can put it. And, this whole idea that we don't need to be in person fellowship with one another locally in a body. We can just have fellowship and church on the internet and on the mountain when we climb it and all that kind of stuff. It's a much deeper question that's troubling to me than kind of the secondary question of this. In some ways, I worry that this could play into that even more, just because it's a spiritual, supernatural kind of a thing. And if you're not grounded in the material and the physical, this world that God has created with a local body, then I think those two really need to go together. So I don't know what's going to happen with the church, but it's very concerning to me.
I got a question, Doug. Hearing you talk about this, question I get asked a whole lot from a lot of people who are in the fringe Christian thing. When they're looking for a church, they always say, I want a church like Doug-van-Dorn's church. And I always say that would be great, but there's not a whole lot of them. And I'm like, you need to find a church with people to start working in the body of Christ. And I think some people have gotten to where if they don't think they're getting taught this from the pulpit, they're not, it's not good enough for them. That they're like, right. It's got to be this. And I always tell them, I'm always like, dude, I'd love if I lived near Doug-van-Dorn, I would be at his church. But you got to fit where you're at. And I'm like, it's a big question with that, because some people, like I think they're like, if it's not being taught, all this stuff with Deuteronomy 32 and the Divine Council and all these things, if it's not being taught in the pulpit, then it's not legit for them, and they won't go to a church at all. And I feel like that's really hindering a lot of what's happening with the Christian community now.
Yeah, very, very well said. This is a secondary issue. It's not a primary issue.
That's right.
You will look in vain to find this in the creeds.
That's right.
You will look in vain to find it in our confessions of faith. And so it's a very important topic. The way I look at it is this didn't change anything that I believed. It added to it.
Right.
Which means that you've got to have the grounding in a church. So what people need to be looking for in a church is solid biblical orthodox theology. And absolutely. This is a bonus. But that's if right. They can't find that, they can't find it. And if you go to some kind of a crazy wacko Gnostic sort of thing that teaches some kind of weird Mormon version of the Divine Council, that's not going to help you.
Right. That's right. Right. Hey, also too, I just want to say something. You talking about how this book came into be, for me, when I remember when Unseen Realm came out, and a lot of Heiser for me came from reading, was first coming across the facade and his fictional stuff, and
Right.
and delving into that, and him talking so much of the UFO community and all this stuff. It just, I remember just taking notes and notes and notes, reading that book and being like, oh my gosh, this is, I was just totally entranced by it. And then when this came out along with it, I was like, okay, who's Doug-van-Dorn? Because I didn't know who you were at the point. But what you just said, talked about that, about how you had written this and presented it to him, makes this book make a lot more sense to me now. Because when I read it the first time along with the Unseen Realm, I was like, man, this is like a complete other companion that's out. It was more than just what you was talking about, what Heiser was talking about. You added a lot of detail that wasn't being talked about now. So if this is I don't know if a lot of people have ever seen this or gotten it, but it's worth having on your shelf. It's a good book.
Yeah, I did not write that as a companion to his book. I mean, I wrote that completely independently. I had my own ending direction that he cut out. And the reason he cut it out is because it had nothing to do with what his book was about, which I'm fine with, In fact, he actually told me 30 minutes after he called me and said that he wanted to publish it, he called me back and said, I can't publish this. And I'm like, well, why? He said, well, I don't like half the questions at the end. And I said, well, I gave it to you. Do whatever you want to with it.
Wow.
And I don't know that he disagreed with the questions, but it was more just, I'm not going that direction. So that's what kind of makes it a strange companion, right? Like, I did not write it to be a study guide to the book.
And for me, when I read it, I was kind of like, I even got that from it. I was like, this is getting a lot. I loved the book, but it was so different from what was going on with it. I was like, okay, I don't think this was written as an actual companion to the Unseen Realm. It felt different to me, but it brought me on to your studies from that point. Then I started, pulling up, finding your other things with the Giants and the Angel of the Lord and stuff like that. So, but yeah, I always feel like people don't know about that companion book. It's not one people talk about a lot.
Hallelujah. This is an exciting talk with Pastor Doug. I'm very thankful for just you being willing to take on 8 podcasters here. And our minds are swirling with questions. And I'm also curious to ask you, and anybody please interject as well, because I can go on for hours about this topic, the dynasty of this fringe Christian. I went to the Warriors conference in San Diego. First time I've ever met any of you guys personally. Bumping into Derek Gilbert and some of the other great people there, and Lisa Haven. And I just thought, I almost wanted to go up to everybody and be like, look, you guys were right. Okay, we're in it now. The last 3 years, this is it. It's no longer a conspiracy theory. Everybody knows this stuff is happening. China just sent balloons with possible EMP weapons over Montana, and that more coming. So ask Michael in Canada. He can tell you if there are any more coming. This is it. But I ask you, Pastor Doug, like, what do we do? I mean, we have this little 1,000 square foot place outside of Asheville. Do we set up a branch church? Do you guys want to start planting small churches? I mean, we started this because of the lockdowns, because of all the masks and the weird vaccine promoting pastors. And we were like, let's just start a little, Bible study club. But the freedom of having your own place, how does one, per se, let's say one of these guys wants to come over here and start a church and connect it with yours? Is that what we need to do? I mean, what's the vision as far as physically continuing the revolution here, physically here?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know. I don't know. I've thought a whole lot about that. I don't know what anybody else have anything to say about that? Interesting question.
Well, we're going into, I believe, excuse me, I believe we're going into a time of, because what's being pushed right now in our that you could see from the Christian side is all this speaking of God and Jesus, like from Trump, and who is not, and from from this side, or that the Q movement, they're all pushing, and they're pushing to bring in that alien, the alien deception, the disclosure, and all that, to crush it, right? So we're going into a place of great thirst. So everyone's going to sin. The frequency of the planet is going to go down, and everyone is going to start thirsting again for goodness, and what is goodness? Goodness is God. So that's when I really feel the revival is actually going to be. Right now, I speak to everybody about the truth, but I don't, all you can do is speak, and if they don't want to listen, then you walk away and you talk to the next person, because they're going to thirst for it. And if you planted that seed now, 2 years down the road, 3 years down the road, when we're in the middle, I believe when we're in the middle of the great deception, and the demonic and the chimeric creatures are walking all around us. Hey, welcome to my channel. Then people are going to really hunger for that word. They're going to be starving for God and that goodness. And I think that's, I think I'm just repeating myself, but that's where it's going to come, and that's where we'll be needed if we're still here, if our heads aren't chopped off. But I think that's coming later. Anyway, later on.
I was talking with somebody today about the craziness. There was a woman on MSNBC who clearly had been jabbed, and she's talking about how back over Christmas and New Year she had this heart attack and all these heart issues, and then she's sitting here blaming everything but the real problem. Yeah. Oh, it was a cold. The cold created myocarditis. Now that I have for the rest of my life. I run 7 miles a day, something like that, she said. It's incredible the lengths that people will go to deceive themselves. And, so people just have to have their minds open. And the first and foremost thing they need to have their minds open to is who Jesus is, the Son of God and the Son of Man. And if they don't have that open, then, you can get excited about the Nephilim and stuff like that, but it's not going to last.
Yeah.
Right.
Pastor Doug, this is kind of piggybacking along with what Nick was saying. Was he had asked about how to entice his friend to listen to more Christian supernatural stuff and what have you. And mine is sort of similar. I think. I have to applaud you. For doing groundbreaking work. You are a red-pilled pastor basically in Colorado, and you're teaching other people, without any fear. You're just boldly, sharing what you know of the Word of God, and which is awesome. But how does one who is not a clergy member like all of us except you share with somebody? Because I find that when I attend just regular blue-pilled churches, and they are for the most part saved, like we go to a non-denominational church, and they probably don't have a supernatural worldview of Genesis 6, and they're probably jabbed and this, that, and the other. How do you help your friends and family break out of the matrix? Like my husband, and he's not red pilled all the way, but he's not blue pilled. Like he's totally anti-vax, but he does understand about the supernatural Genesis 6, that the fallen angels had sex with the human women, and then created the Nephilim / giants, but he doesn't like to hear about it. He's kind of a purple pilled person, I guess. So he doesn't like to hear even the word Nephilim. Like it actually bothers him, and I'm scratching my head like, okay, why? And he was raised as a Christian, and it was very traditional oriented. And he's Canadian, but it was very traditional Ukrainian Christians. They don't kind of believe in stuff outside the box, and he and I used to actually get into these heated discussions over it, and I would try to share with him / tell him about everything I know, and he just did not receive it, and we would get into arguments and things like that, and I just completely laid off of it. And then back in 2020, we took our vacation out of state to Tennessee, and then en route he brings up, oh, let's go to the Bigfoot museum. I'm like, hallelujah. And so he is coming around, but it's a slow process. He's one of those slow to warm up people to think outside the box. How do you, on a practical level, share with your blue pilled Christian friend at church, and how do you deal with your spouse or your significant other who's having a difficult time wrapping their head around the supernatural worldview?
It's interesting you put the red pill in there and the whole cultural thing that's going on right now, because I've wondered how much they're related to each other. You go read the drops, and I think the
duality.
The post that's written the most is Ephesians 6. Like, I think there's 3 Q drops that talk about Ephesians 6, which I find really interesting.
Oh, neat.
There's some other stuff in there that I don't necessarily agree with, but from a Christian point of view, but I think that's pretty interesting. So, like, it's almost like, I don't know that you have to have your eyes open to the supernatural world to see what's going on politically, culturally, but it sure does help. So anyway, that's a sidelight because you brought that up. But to me, I think that what I've found is that I try and find things that people already believe and that they don't realize that they believe. So here's a good example. When I was first teaching this to a Bible study guys in our church, and one guy who had just come out of brain surgery and unexpected brain surgery, and he was having a hard time thinking and dealing with stuff. And every time I brought up the Giants, he would just fall asleep on me. And I thought, there's something more going on here than just brain surgery. I mean, because we talk about other things, he's totally fine. It's almost like he had a moral issue with the thing. And so at one point I just said, man, what is your problem? Why do you have such a problem with this? You believe in Goliath, don't you? And he goes, well, yeah, of course. I said, well, then what's your problem? He goes, what do you mean? I said, well, Goliath descended from these guys. Read the genealogy. And it was like a light bulb moment. He couldn't believe that he had never seen that before. So it's a matter of finding things that people already believe and understand. So another thing that I like to tell people is, okay, so you haven't heard this for your entire life. Well, it hasn't been in the church for 500 years. Okay, fine. It hasn't been in it for 1,500 years. And did you know, I'll ask them questions like, you believe church history is an important thing, right? Like the church fathers, there's a line, and they kept tradition, and tradition of the apostles, and they carried the faith down like Jude says to do. Yeah. Well, did you know that for the first 300 years of the church, nobody disagreed on this? And we have dozens and dozens of things that talk about it. And there's nobody else who says anything different. And they're like, what? What are you talking about? And just show them the quotes. And so those are kinds of things that you can do that you need to, kind of soften the blow with something that they already can accept.
Yes.
And then you just kind of have to just love them and be patient with them and let God deal with them in their own time. And, when we love people, even if they disagree with us, then that sometimes does more than any words that we can say to them.
Yes,
So,
definitely.
If your spouse that's really struggling with it, don't beat them up over the head with it. Let God beat them up
No,
over
it
the head
doesn't
with
work.
He'll do it.
Right. And it's interesting. I actually had a podcast that you did on YouTube with Paranormal or somebody, I forget who it was. Iron Sharpens Iron, and we were having dinner, we were eating fried chicken and everything, and I thought, oh, it was 2 years ago he would say, shut it off, but I'm like, honey, I have to listen to him for research. I have to really get sharpened, with his
there you go. That's a great thing to do right there.
With Pastor Doug's research, and he was chopping on his fried chicken and potatoes and everything, and I'm like, okay, he didn't give me a dirty look. Okay, all right, this is good. All right, and even if he's like looking at the football score on his phone, I'm thinking it's getting into his mind subconsciously somehow. But yeah, it's funny. He actually enjoyed listening. I could tell that he enjoyed listening to your show because you come at it with a theological treatise and perspective. But I'll have to be honest with you, there was another show where it was all about this one person's weird experience with a giant. It's on a show that we all met on, but it was from like a first, like, it's very cerebral, right? So what do you think about the serpent seed theory?
So first thing I think is that there's a lot of weird things going on in Genesis into 2 and into chapter 3. I think there's a lot of potential like sexual innuendo and overtones. And I don't know that I understand what all that is about. But that said, the text is, it couldn't be any clearer that Adam is the father of Cain. Like, it's what the verse says.
Okay.
So when I talk about Genesis 3:15 and the serpent and the war of the seeds, right? So it's not necessarily, it's not that I don't think that it could have happened. It's just that I don't think that the scripture teaches that.
Right.
And so, because the very same kind of a thing did happen later in the days of Jared and afterwards before the flood. So, I don't know what it is that, I mean, I know some of the reasons why people want to go there, but I don't know why people like really hang on to this and don't want to let it go. It's a strange thing to me.
Hey, I think it's because people were up at 3:00 in the morning and heard Arnold Murray on the Shepherd's Chapel teaching about it.
No doubt. Exactly.
That's where I first heard it. And I remember
Yep.
that, hey, at least you got the companion Bible, which was great. I learned a whole lot from that with Bollinger and stuff, but that's for the first time I'd ever heard the serpent seed thing. And he was very adamant about it. He was like, this is it.
Now that
stuff.
it goes
Oh,
back a
wow.
long way. I think the rabbis were talking about that long ago. So
Good too.
Doug, do you think that the reptilians are a different creature than the giants, or do you think the giants and the reptilians are one and the same?
So if I had to make a guess and put money on it, I would say that the best money would be that the reptilians are probably the watchers. If you go and you read
okay.
some of the old, you go and read some of the old pseudepigrapha, Jewish pseudepigrapha, they describe, and the Dead Sea Scrolls do this too, they describe the watchers as serpentine in appearance.
Okay,
and this
that
is of
makes
course
sense.
exactly what Satan is described as, a serpent. So like, I don't think that you have a snake dangling down a tree talking to a woman. I think you have a watcher talking to the woman. So that would mean that the reptilians are not the Nephilim. They would be their fathers.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I know that, and when I hear both sides, when I hear that the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is an actual factual tree dispensing that was dispensing the knowledge of good and evil, that was an actual factual tree with fruit, albeit not apples, of course. So that makes sense. But and then adherents had said that Eve supposedly said, I had gotten a man, from the angel of the Lord, or I had got, or no, I'm sorry, pardon me.
From the Lord, yeah.
She says I had gotten a man from the Lord, and so I guess what the hidden meaning of that is I had gotten a man from the angel of the Lord. So, I mean, for me, the jury is out, because I'm like, okay, what is going on here? Because we know that there's actual factual trees that are dispensing fruit in the New Jerusalem. So if there are actual trees that are dispensing, fruit for the healing of the nations in the New Jerusalem / heaven, why wasn't the tree of the knowledge of good and evil like bearing actual fruit? So that's where I'm like, I'm not sure, but I definitely believe that there are reptilians that are possibly in like government leadership, and sometimes celebrities, sometimes politicians, or whatever, that can shapeshift. So then I'm kind of scratching my head, like, okay, are those the watchers, or are they the offspring of the watchers plus human women? And are they, so I don't know. I guess for me, the jury is sort of out, with regards to that. Not sure.
Here's a couple things to think about. So Genesis 4:1, Now, Adam knew Eve, his wife.
Yes,
So
Adam
when it
knew
says
Eve his
he knew
wife.
her,
Yes.
that means he had sex with her. That's what that means. Okay. And she conceived and bore Cain and said, I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord.
With the help of the
first
Lord.
all,
Okay.
If it was I've gotten a man with the Lord, then that would mean she had sex with the angel of the Lord. And that would be insane. Okay. So basically, I looked at it basically as that the angel of the Lord was the midwife delivering the baby. The other thing is that talking about the trees of Eden, here's something just interesting to think about. In Ezekiel 31, you go read that chapter. It's prophecy against, I don't remember if it's against Egypt or Babylon or Assyria. It's one of those big kingdoms that was so brutal to Israel, but it calls the king of that kingdom this mighty tree. And then it talks about all the other trees of Eden envying it. Well, what's that talking about? It's not talking about literal tree, but it is using a metaphor. And so I think it's interesting that if that's true, if there's a metaphor going on here, and the great king of the world is called the tree of Eden, and then all the other trees are envying it, that would mean that the other nations around are envying him. But if you put that into a divine council worldview, then you have the leader being envied by the other gods. And so the trees of Eden there are actually metaphorical for the other entities that are there. Because Eden is a divine council meeting place. That's kind of the whole point of it. Heaven and earth are intersecting. So, I tend to think there probably was a literal tree, but I don't think that that's what the main message is being conveyed. When Revelation says that I've opened up the way to the tree of life, Jesus is talking about right now. He's not talking about the future, and he's talking about himself. I am the tree of life.
Mm-hmm.
And you come to me and you will have life.
Yes.
So just a couple things to think about.
Yes, definitely good things to think about for sure.
And when you talk about the divine council, just for the audience that may not be very familiar with this new worldview, which is not new, it's just pure straight up Bible, naked
the
Bible.
return of
Right.
And it brings about some questions, but just for people to understand, when it talks about, let us descend to the earth, and this word Elohim is plural, and it's not 3 in 1, just the Trinity. The word Trinity is not in the Bible. I'm not trying to take off Orthodox Christians or various denominations, and it's fine to just talk about the Trinity and to, the Nicene Creed, and just say, okay, we believe in God the Father and the Holy Spirit and Jesus Christ, the Son of God, and that's fine. But there's mysteries in the Bible that the Elohim is a plural term, and that kind of almost gives you a totally new, almost a spacey sci-fi view of what God might actually look like as far as this council, the divine council. People need to read these books and go on your website. And again, your website for the audience, if just midway here, I know we're doing a 4-hour show tonight, right? Everybody, we all agreed to this, right?
Absolutely. 100%.
Well, sir, would you like to just share your link to your website so people can buy your books? Because people need to buy dozens of these and just give them to everybody. Like get culty with this. Okay. Get out there on the streets, go to your pastors, infiltrate, share, because these are game-changing, huge shifting topics. And then I have a question for you, but I don't have your website pulled up here. I apologize.
It's just my name. It's douglas-van-dorn.com. And I'll give our church's website out. Yeah, I'll give our churches too, because we got all our sermons up there. And so, like, anything that I've preached on that's got a weird passage, if I preached on the book, I've preached on that passage. So Psalms, Genesis, Exodus, Revelation, all kinds of texts are there. So it's rbcnc.com, rbcnc.com,
nc.com.
and we have those all linked there. There's PDFs for most of them, and there's audio for all of them. So,
well, sir, if you don't mind,
Awesome.
if I just interject here and ask you, how do we come to people who are very strong, staunch Orthodox Christians or other denominations that are very like, this is our creed. How dare you talk about It's divine counsel, when there's this very strong sense of the Trinity and nobody shall move this, I don't want to say idol, but people idolize their creeds. How do you go about bringing this information and just explain it to people that maybe never heard this? And I know, with the interest of your time, we want to respect your schedule and everything. But just okay, if you would just like to talk to the people that are following. There's a new movement of people that are joining the Orthodox Church, which I respect greatly. I'm not Orthodox. I'm not Catholic. I'm kind of raised Protestant, but I have a lot of interest in whatever I can take from these that are good. And I'm noticing a huge, an influx into the Orthodox Church, especially from young men.
Yeah.
What would you say to some of those people as far as bringing this information to them about the world, the divine counsel, and your incredible body of work on the subject about the identity of God and regarding the Trinity?
Well, a couple thoughts for you, Michael. One is that, like I said earlier, I don't view this in any way, shape, or form overthrowing or setting aside or adding to the Trinity. I look at it as moving from, in fact, it really doesn't do anything at all except for enhance my view of the Trinity.
Wow.
But I view it as kind of being able to move out of black and white into living color in terms of the other realm. God is in the other realm. He's the creator of the other realm.
Amen.
The triune God, Father, Son, and Spirit, they're all involved in the divine counsel in their own ways. All we're doing is adding pieces to it. So like if you go to the end of I think it's 1 Kings 22, there's this divine council scene, and God's up there, and there's these guys that are talking, and they're talking about, God says, well, who's going to go and be a lying spirit in the mouth of the prophets because he's so angry at the king of Israel? And they're fighting over it. And then finally one spirit says, well, I'll go do it. And God says, all right, you will succeed. So here you have God actually overseeing the divine council. I'm not sure if that's the Father or the Son, but whatever the case is, they're interacting with God, these other created beings, and that would include certainly the sons of God, if not also demonic entities. I don't know if I've made up my mind on what that spirit was exactly, but it seems to have been able to go down and possess these guys or whatever to make them do what they did. So all we're doing is like filling in an empty room, right? You've got God there, but what else is there? Well, nothing else is there. No, there's a lot of other things there. We're putting furniture to it is really all we're doing. And the influx to orthodoxy is fascinating to me. Just my personal opinion. I don't want to offend anybody, but I think that the reason why we're seeing so many young men go over there is there's a couple of reasons for it. I think evangelicalism has become so feminine in the way that it does church. It's so emotional that a lot of men are just like, I don't want to have anything to do with that. It's just the way God made the sexes. I'm not saying it's bad to be emotional. I'm just saying that the church, in the evangelical churches that they have grown up in, that's just not doing it for them. So they see orthodoxy. Some of them see Anglicanism or Rome to kind of lesser degrees. Or the Orthodox is weird because it's a mystery, right? It's out east and we don't know what it is, so it must be really cool. And they've got these cool liturgies, and they talk about angels in the liturgy, and they got all these pictures on the walls, and it feels, and it is old, and it feels traditional, and it's like, this is what it should be. It's kind of ironic because it's like a lot of them are going there for the feelings, which is exactly why they're leaving the other group. So, and I said, to kind of answer the question directly about these groups, I kind of said it earlier. Look, this worldview is not overthrowing anything in your creed or your catechism or your confession. Nothing. There's nothing in my confession of faith, London Baptist 1689, that says anything about the divine counsel. It says nothing about it. So for somebody to come along and say you're being a heretic, it doesn't even make sense. Like, where am I being a heretic? I'm not saying anything that's talked about in there. I'm talking about things that are not in there, you know? So, and like we've said earlier, this is something that the early church knew all about. So it's not like it is brand new. Nobody's ever thought about this before. It's more like it was just lost or rejected on purpose, or a combination of both, or maybe something else. I don't know, but I don't know if that helps answer the question, but
very enlightening. I appreciate that. And Jay Dyer, that works through InfoWars and has his own podcast, is one of the main guys for people to check out, and just pray for him. I mean, pray for these guys. Like, I'm not in a competition. I don't have a church to draw people to. I think it's more about getting people to be aware and listen to your work, and just expand their, get the blinders off. We're going into a time where I believe that the church is going to, for all respective purposes, look like it's been destroyed. And then the Antichrist will arise and say, oh, I defeated the church. It'll just be like the Catholic Church burned down or whatever. And it's going to be crazy. So we need everybody, the good Catholics and the good Orthodoxes and the good Protestants, and I mean, just everybody. And now, I'm a revolutionary, so again, if anybody wants to start a little mini church and read Michael Heiser texts, and you guys have so much material, like, oh my gosh, like we could just literally start a denomination with this stuff, but we're not gonna. But I'm just saying we could if we wanted to. But people should start Bible studies. People need to start physically gathering and doing like legit, like let's organize a little bit. Let's not get too culty, but let's organize. Anything that you want to share as far as what you're working on right now and future projects, and what's been like the latest thing on your plate?
Yeah, well, I'm going to put out a 10th anniversary edition of the Giant book. So I've got that almost completely finished, just working on a cover. So I've added a couple chapters at the end, whole bunch of material in the middle of it that's just kind of added to the chapters and making it look a lot better, and new footnotes and fixing dead links and new appendix and all kinds of stuff. So I'm excited about that. It should be out really soon, hopefully. And yeah, I've always got other stuff that I'm working on, but nothing that's super close to being finished. So,
well, it's such a pleasure to talk to you. And do any of the other gentlemen, would you guys like to interject? Yeah, Nick, please.
Yeah. I had a few questions. Let's try to not overwhelm you, but
you're not overwhelming,
dude. Go for it, man.
Cool.
This is like the new generation. This is the TikTok master here, dude. Go for it.
This sounds kind of silly. I don't know if you touched this, but like, who stopped it? Like, some people, like, Council Nicaea, or Augustine, or like, Martin Luther. Like, did it just like die out? Like, who stopped the Like, I feel like you've talked about multiple times. I'm trying to figure out.
Let me give you my answer to this. I think it's a great question. I've looked into it quite a bit, and people need to understand what happened. So this whole poo-pooing of Nicaea thing is just insane. It's ridiculous. It's revisionist history. It needs to go away, be thrown in the trash can, never see the light of day again. Period. Even Augustine, when he's dissing on the Nephilim, he's kind of just going with what he's heard at that point in time. And in fact, he talks about the book of Enoch in the city of God, and he goes, the reason why Enoch, and by his time, Enoch had been essentially lost. I don't know that we have the answer for why it was lost. That's another question. But he basically says, well, it wasn't put in scripture because it was so old we couldn't trust it. That's what he said.
Wow.
So what seems to have happened is this, all right? You've got the first century. You've got this guy named Jesus of Nazareth who comes along, and he says he's the Son of God. And he starts making a bunch of enemies of the religious elite in Israel, the Pharisees. And the Pharisees, he starts having these confrontations with them. And he says things like, it quotes Psalm 82, which is right about the divine council. Talks about how, well, your own scripture says that there are gods. And he's essentially saying, I'm one of them. People completely misinterpret this, saying that, well, he's calling them gods. No, he's not calling them gods. That doesn't help his case at all. I'm a god, you're a god, we're all gods, let's all get along. That's not what he's saying. As soon as he says that your scripture says there are gods, he says, I and the Father are one. And then they want to stone him for saying this. Okay, when he's put to death, the reason he's put to death is because he quotes Daniel 7, and he says that one like the Son of Man is here, and you won't see him again until you see him riding on the clouds of heaven. In other words, I am that guy in Daniel 7. Wow. All right, so now they say, blasphemy, blasphemy, you got to put him to death for this. So they put him to death. Then, get into my conspiracy theory book for a minute, he rises from the dead, and all of a sudden, they don't know what to do with this. So they create a conspiracy theory, which is that Jesus didn't really rise from the dead. The disciples stole his body. Yeah. And so guess who becomes the conspiracy theorists? The disciples do. Because they said, no, we saw the body. We saw the body. No, because the elites said that they stole the body. So you've got this problem with these guys that existed right there during his ministry, as soon as he rose from the dead. And then this got really, really bad over the next 40, 50, 60 years because all these Jews and rabbis were becoming Christians. So there's a book called Hebrews. That book of Hebrews is written to Christians, but it seems that it was mostly written to former Jewish rabbis who had become Christians because they were all over the place. And so something happened after the temple was destroyed in 70 AD, which is that the Jews lost their formal religion. They were no longer able to make sacrifices. They're dispersed around the nations. And so the rabbis start saying, we've got to start writing down our oral theology, our oral teaching. And as they did that, they started making these slight changes to their theology. In fact, this is what got me started on this whole topic, because this is the Deuteronomy 32:8 textual variant, sons of God. And what Dr. Heiser argues there is that, and he's not the one that made it up, is that the rabbis changed that language to the sons of Israel. And the reason why is because son of God is divine language. And when Jesus calls himself the Son of God, he's claiming to be one of these beings. Of course, he claims to be more than that because he says he's equal with the Father, which no other son of God would ever make that claim. Baal would never say, I am equal with El. He would never do that. He would fight Yom, but he would never say he's equal with El. Jesus does. So the rabbis, what they do is sometime at the end of the 1st century, early 2nd century, is they make it an official heresy to believe in something called two powers in heaven. Mm-hmm. Two powers in heaven is this ancient idea, found it throughout the Old Testament, that there are two equally powerful powers that are both God, and yet there's only one God. And so they said anybody who believes that now is a heretic. And so rabbinical Judaism outlawed that theology. And as soon as they did that, Jews stopped converting to Christianity. Because this is what John is writing to in his first gospel. When he says, in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. That's a two powers text. The whole book of John is a two powers text, saying that Jesus is the second power in heaven. He's second Yahweh, but there's only one God. So when they did that, then this, of course, is going to start spreading. And so there's a scholar named Yap Dodens, who wrote a whole dissertation on the sons of God. You can go read him on academia.com. And he wrote a little article called something like The Provenance of the Sethite View or something like that. In other words, where did it originate? And he argues that it originated in Syria sometime in I think the 2nd or 3rd century AD. And then it occurred as I think what happened is the rabbis were teaching this, Christians started hearing it, and they don't have the internet to go and check Google Books to see, well, what did this father say about that? Oh, well, they're wrong.
Right.
They don't have that kind of technology. So they're hearing things, and people start talking, and over the course of 100 years, the church just kind of starts hearing this as more, this is the accepted view. It's a Sethite view. It wasn't like anything evil or nefarious that the church fathers are like, we have to stamp this out. It was more like it was actually the Jews that had perpetrated this in order to keep people from believing in Jesus Christ. And the Christians didn't understand that that was what was going on. And so by the time Augustine, Chrysostom, Theodoret come along around 400 AD, this had become kind of the staple view. And the older view that was universal, that hadn't really been written about for 75, 100 years, now it had just disappeared. And so, yes, Chrysostom, they mock Theodoret. He calls us mad fools, for believing in this, but they just don't know their history. So then you can fast forward for the next 1,000 years, and you can go to Luther and Calvin and those guys saying the same thing. Well, they don't have the Book of Enoch anymore. It's been lost. So they can't go and read that. They're reading, otherwise stalwart church fathers, Chrysostom and Augustine. These are like their heroes. And for lots of good reasons, they are. But on this topic, it just so happened that they didn't know what they were talking about. They just didn't understand. So that's a long answer that I think is really important for people to understand. This whole thing was not caused by the church trying to get rid of supernaturalism. It was caused by the Jews keeping people from believing in Jesus.
Wow. It's interesting. I have to share this comment, Pastor Doug. This is how far-reaching the Sethite, shall I say, heresy has reached into. This is how far-reaching the Sethite theory has reached into. So here I am, raised as an atheist, as a Buddhist, or whatever, and I become a Christian when I was 16, and I was so interested in reading every Christian book I could. And I remember that the library in '89 had gotten rid of like 5 or 6 Christian books. And one of the books was The Late Great Planet Earth by Hal Lindsey, and then this eschatological book by, I think, Jack Van Impe or something like that. Anyhow, and I believe that they also got rid of a concordance. And so that was like the beginning of the purge of anything Christian from the public library at our high school. So anyway, I remember getting hold of this biblical concordance, and I would say 90 to 99% of it was bang on. I'm looking back, but at the time, I remember wanting to understand that cryptic Genesis 6. And I remember, I wonder what this is about. So I'm scratching my head when I was like 17, 18 years old, trying to learn about all of the Bible from a different perspective other than maybe what the pastor is saying. And so when I read Genesis 6 in the concordance, here's this person just learning about the Lord. And it says, I remember in the concordance, it said that some people, saying this in the pontificating tone, because that's basically, what they're doing is they're pontificating / telling what they were told, in their seminary, and the seminary was told, by hearsay from, like you said, the Jewish people who wanted to disavow Jesus' deity. So in the concordance, it said that some people mistakenly believe that the sons of God were fallen angels that cohabitated with human women, and their offspring, were the men of renown or / giants. Well, so the insinuation is that these sons of God actually had sexual relations with human women. The sons of God couldn't be fallen angels because the Bible says that angels neither are. That we will be like the angels in heaven, neither marrying nor given in marriage. So angels can't have sexual relations with human women. So quite naturally, so it can't be that the sons of God were fallen angels. That the sons of God were the godly line of Seth having relations with the human women. And so here I am, an 18-year-old girl, that knows nothing about Christianity. And so I read that. So it's interesting how far-reaching that is. And then I had that view, and I grew in the Lord and everything, and I thought I was doing fine without that knowledge of the true nature of the fallen angel, of the true nature of the sons of God. And I was growing in the Lord and everything, but I feel like it was a puzzle piece that wasn't quite there, because I had always wondered, how could a loving God seem like a genocidal maniac and tell the Israelites to go and do a wholesale slaughtering of these different people groups? How could a loving God do that? So that major piece of the puzzle just wasn't there for me, and I wondered, was God, genocidal? Was he unmerciful in the Old Testament to these people groups? I mean, I'm like one of the first Christians in my lineage, as far as I know. Well, if you roll back the hands of time to the Chinese, well, I'm Thai, but the Thais are descended from the Chinese. Way back, the Chinese, their little Chinese characters have Noah and the Ark and stuff like that. So at some point in my lineage, there were Bible believing Christians, that started from the Tower of Babel and such. But then, of course, got more that they unfortunately got deceived by Buddhism and what have you. So anyway, my point is that it is interesting that I didn't know anything about Christianity in the first 16 years of my life. And then when I was 17, 18 is when I read about the false Sethite theory in Genesis 6. But yes, definitely ever since 2014, when I got red pilled with Genesis 6, that the sons of God were in fact fallen angels, that big huge puzzle piece was put into place. Bam. And I saw God, Yahweh in the Old Testament, was not a genocidal maniac. He was sanctioning the Israelites to kill these non-human or partially human entities. So we need to understand that the Nephilim / giants were an abomination. They were evil. They ravaged the land. They ate people. Even the Thailand, when I was a kid in Thailand, I would see these pictorials and this artwork of these weird, huge, giant, demonic looking things, like people, like some Thai people, Siamese people, had painted these huge, ugly looking, monstrous, giant things that were eating people. I mean, it was so disgusting. They had drawn pictures of them like chomping on, a leg of a Thai man or something. And then I go, what is that? And they said, oh, these are the giants, the friendly demons. They were called Yuk, Y-U-K, Yuk. And I'm like, friendly demons? And okay. And they said that they were guardians of the Buddhist temple. So I'm like scratching my head, like, okay, so that is interesting that the Thai / Siamese people actually revered the Yuks. And no wonder why they would guard the Buddhist temple, because they were the guardians of false religion. Anyway, just a interesting thought / comment.
Yep.
Hey, I want to add something real quick. You were talking about the two powers in heaven. There's Heiser did a really good course, one of the last courses he's put on his at the Awakening School. I took it in the fall, and it's a really, really very in-depth course on the two powers in heaven. If anybody's interested, that's at the Awakening School of Theology. Hey, real quick, Doug, I got to take out of here. I just want to say something. I noticed you have a guitar behind you, and I was like, okay, Doug's a guitar player. Just gonna let you know, myself and Judd Burton are working on some music, and I think we need to get you in on this.
I can't play it worth a lick, bro.
It doesn't matter, man. We're gonna Judd's working. We're playing on some
matters.
things. We're working on something.
It's your name that matters. It's your
that's
name.
Right. That's right. Your name. That's all that matters. You can play a couple things, but yeah, me and Judd are actually working on a nice little tribute for Heiser right now. We've got some music we're putting together for something like that.
Oh,
so
cool.
I might contact you, see if you're interested. Play a chord.
I need to talk to you about your before you leave, Ken. I need to talk to you. No, I'm not now, but I wanted to talk to you about your talk with Sherry Tenpenny.
Yeah, absolutely. You can. We're friends on Facebook, so just reach out to me and we'll chat.
Okay, sounds good.
I'll talk to you about it. But I got to take off because I got to teach early in the morning tomorrow, guys.
Oh, thanks so much, Kenny, for stopping by.
Great. Everybody was awesome. It was really a lot of fun. I look forward. We'll do this again soon.
It was fun having you on board. Thank you so much, Kenny.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Doug.
Great to meet you, Kenny.
Doug, one question from me, and then we'll wrap this up. Well, of course, feel free to ask any questions after me, of course, guys. But my last question for me, Doug, is what's your most favorite book that you've written?
Oh, wow. I don't know. They're all, I mean, it's like asking your favorite child in some ways. I mean, there's the first. There's
Good answer.
Top
there's the
three.
one
How's
that
that?
there's the one I think is the most important, which I think is the angel of the Lord. The baptism book to me was just so important in so many ways, just for me learning how to write, and I think it's a pretty unique argument for the topic. And conspiracy theory was such a fun one because I'd tried to do that one for like 7 years and nothing would come out. I would sit down at the typewriter and I'm like, nothing's happening. And then March 2020 happened and that book was written in a week.
Wow.
It was crazy. It was so weird.
I'm looking forward to reading those too.
Yeah. Giants. I mean, obviously Giants has changed my life. So those are kind of four of them that are singled out on my mind, I guess.
Awesome. Great.
One of the things that I touch on in my latest series is the Hegelian dialectic, or and for people, the understanding the laws of three, and the laws of three that we know of written down through Freemasonic teachings. Heracles, but anyway, he that was the fourth century BC, and using the laws of three, what we call the Hegelian dialectic today, that is the witchcraft, as Dr. Judd said, using witchcraft to break down the beliefs of the church. And how, because one of the things that I notice is like with what you talked about earlier was, there is a logical breakdown of the church just over time, because we can't share all this, but there are insidious groups and entities that have been around all this time as well, who have planted in and using the law of three. And for people who aren't aware, so a lot of people think the Hegelian dialectic is action, reaction, solution. That's so simplistic. It doesn't even get into how devious it is. It's basically just drips a little bit of lie into it. Because if you have one side that believes in ultimate truth, and then the other side says, we have a major problem with this, but if we just change this little tiny thing right here, then I think we're going to be good. And so it forces people to compromise, and then you've watered down ultimate truth. And that's basically what Hegelian dialectic is. And you do that over and over and over and over again. And then you run into a lot of the problems that we have today. But anyway, that's one thing that I think is really important for people to understand, because then they can start to see this Hegelian dialectic in the news and media, and it's everywhere. Since I've been studying, I'm like, oh, Hegelian dialectic, that's what they're doing there. Anyway, yeah.
Oh yeah.
No, I'm done. Believe me, I kept that short for me. Believe me.
I just want to commend everybody that all of us could probably talk for hours, and that Doug even took this on. It's so brave. And we are all gathering the seeds before our new strategy is just, we talk for an hour before the guest comes on, so we don't get tempted to like tackle you, not let you talk, because your time is very precious, Doug. And we just really appreciate the work that you've done, the work that you're doing, and any way that we can help carry the torch, as sadly Michael Heiser isn't doing very well and everything. I wish that we could somehow get him to take MMS, which is known to cure 4th stage cancer, but I know it's a very sensitive thing when people come in like, oh, this is the cure, and when you're already on chemo, and it's I understand, but if anybody can actually get MMS to Dr. Heiser, it's something that's been on my heart for a while. If we can continue to carry the torch, though, that's what I really want you to just consider us all, like, just please give us some kind of blessing. We will carry it. Give us one of those swords. You have so many swords behind you.
You have no idea how many swords I have back there.
Awesome.
That's awesome. Great.
I have two quick questions for Doug, and I know we gotta go. I know it's late, but thank you so much for everything that, the time and everything. So the two quick questions are this. we're going back almost an hour and a half. So I wanted to talk about like the post. We're beyond postmodern. It's beyond post-Christian. So that's the thing is simple. In the 18 and 1900s and like early 2000, not even early 2000s, it was like atheism and like, getting away and like liberalism and, all that stuff. So like now I feel like it's more supernatural and witchcraft and new age and stuff like that. And you even mentioned
Yeah.
I met people, and when I'm witnessing, they're having like Odin or like the Thor and like with the Ragnarok and like the modern day comics and everything, pushing all this dark religion, like you're saying, North mythology. So was it easier to be a Christian back when the people were atheists and agnostics and like didn't go into the supernatural, or is this a better time to evangelize or to be a Christian? Like I'm so confused. Like, was it that easier to be a Christian in the 1950s, 60s, or like I don't understand. Like from your perspective and from history.
Well, first of all, I'm not that old.
I think Doug was born like a year or two before me.
Doug, I didn't mean it like that.
In theory.
No, I used to listen to R.C. Sproul a lot. So like he would always talk about like, Voltman and do whatever. He was older. Okay, all I'm just trying to say is like where we're at now. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like back in the day, like 10 years ago. Like, you know what I'm saying?
3 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everything changed 3 years ago.
Everything changed in 2001, and everything changed when Obama came in, and everything changed in 2020. It's kind of the 16-year plan. So, yeah, I guess in one way the answer is no. It's never been easier to be a Christian because you can go down to the buckle of the Bible Belt, and you can go yourself to church every day, every Sunday, and you can be put on your makeup and your good clothes and put on a good show in church and do your prayers and everything. And then for the next 6 days, you live like Satan. So that's never going to change. That's human nature. You're either regenerated by the Spirit of God or you're not. But culturally speaking, I would say this. I would say Christian ethics were a lot easier than they are today. To be a good person, because you had first of all, you had a lot smaller cities than you have today. That's kind of one of the big pushes, get everybody in the cities, get them out of the small towns. Everybody knew each other. You couldn't get away with anything. Obviously, this isn't everywhere. We've had big cities for a long time, but the American landscape has totally changed. I forget what I heard. It was like when the revolution started, 90% of the people were farmers. Today, it's like 5% of the people. And so what you're seeing is this mass migration into the cities where they can control your thoughts, and it's impersonal, and it's corrupt politically, and just so many things that are bad about it. Yeah. So, I mean, the cultural landscape has changed insanely. Talk to somebody who's 80 years old who actually did live through the 50s, and then listen to them talk to you about the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 10s, and 20s, and you will get this. You'll get and you can go back before. I remember talking to my grandparents about this, and lived growing in the 20s and 30s. Not much change in the 20s, not much change in the 30s or the 40s or the 50s. There was massive cultural revolution in the 60s. Massive, absolutely massive. People don't understand what happened in the 60s. And I think that in some ways that was kind of the unleashing of this spiritual realm on at least our culture through drugs and some other stuff they were doing. 70s was just kind of a continuation of that. 80s was a continuation of that. 90s was getting a little worse. But like I said, 2001 there was a marker. Something happened that year that changed the landscape. I think from the highest ups, because they're able to do some pretty powerful things politically. And then it's just been exponential ever since, and especially the last 2-3 years. So it's much, much more difficult to have Christian morals today I think. But at the same time, I don't think it's any harder or easier to be a Christian today than it's ever been.
Last question to go off this for sure. I'm seriously, I'm gleaning so much, honestly. Okay, so in the light of this, I know like we've been doing as Christians, we've been doing this for 2,000 years, preaching the gospel, keeping it simple. But like when we reach out to like, because these people are supernatural sensitive. Like I just,
Right.
I'm more charismatic. So like I literally prayed for somebody and literally like demons manifest and we cast those things out. And their mom's literally a witch and playing with crystals and stuff. So it's like the supernatural realm is like crazy right now. Like everybody's on it. So I heard you say earlier, like you got to meet them where they're at. Well, that's where they're at. I'm
Right.
like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
well, the context of that, remember, was Christians, people that grown up in church, and you're talking about a whole different kind of group of people. And if you want to meet those people where they're at, this is why this is such a perfect thing to do that with. You don't really need much intro at all. You just start going into it. They're like, oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense. We had a Chinese lady that was coming to our church for a while. And, you were talking about this a little earlier with your own background in Thai and China and stuff. But I started talking about the divine counts in one sermon. And afterwards, she's like, oh, yeah, we that happens all the time over in China. I'm like, what are you talking about? Yeah. Spirits. And I mean, the whole deal. She's like, this isn't a big deal to us. We know exactly what you're talking about. So in some ways, it's a very American or Western sort of thing that the materialism has really gotten to us in ways that it hasn't other people's.
Right.
Africa too. China and Africa.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We definitely live in a post-Christian era. Paul and I were just talking about that the other night. It's probably same with Michael. I talked with many people about how we are living in a post-Christian era. It's funny because when I first became a Christian, I thought, I can tell other people about Jesus and they're going to, now have something in common with my American friends and all this stuff. And that was definitely a rude awakening for me. I was like, I'm a Christian, everybody, and it could have been that I lived in a blue state, California, Northern California. Northern and Southern California is very different. Anyway, so when I was telling them about the Lord, I had, even in the late 80s, early 90s, I mean, they that may be before you were born, Nick, not sure, but I had hard-hearted friends. To this day I still have hard-hearted friends that are still refuse Jesus, and every Easter and every Christmas. Every Easter, I have one friend in particular. She posts, "Happy Zombie Jesus Day." I mean, sometimes it's neutral, sometimes it's straight out antagonism towards Christianity. But then I've had a lot of people that are conservative Christians. Heck, you don't have to be even conservative, but I have friends that are, I would say, half and half in ever since the late 80s, early 90s, that have become a Christian, maybe because I became a Christian, and they saw, well, heck, if Jerry can change, because of Christ, then I can too. And then there's some to this day, been friends 30 plus years, still hard-hearted. But definitely we live in a post-Christian era, like Pastor Doug said, ever since the 60s, with the sexual revolution and the Beatles coming in with their, new age, principles or new age philosophy and things like that. And, I would say if a person, if you ever heard Kenny's testimonial, a person is at this day and age, a person is either, like you said, Nick, either a Christian or they're into new age, or they're into witchcraft, or they're into whatever. It seems like, when it was weird because when I was growing up, I had a lot of friends, even in the late 80s, early 90s, they were into yoga and borderline Buddhism. And I'm like scratching my head like, okay, I grew up in Buddhism. Believe me, there's nothing there. There was no transformative power. My mother committed suicide when I was 12, and if there was transformative power behind Buddhism, then I believe that she would be alive to this day, if she had received Christ and was healed, saved, and delivered. But I'm not saying that that's a paradigm of or an example of Buddhism, but I'm saying that I've grown up with it. There's nothing in it. The only only time I had changed my heart was was through my relationship with Christ.
Did you practice? Like, did you go to temples and did you meditate and all that?
I did.
All that stuff.
Yes and no. My dad and my late mom took me to the Buddhist temple, and we would have to walk on our knees without shoes to a monk, and do the white plot, meaning bow down 3 times and say a prayer to Buddha, things like that. So I never was a Buddhist, but I was an atheist or an agnostic. But one thing that really planted a seed in my heart was Americans worshiping Jesus, during Christmas. I mean, I don't know what you all think about Christmas, but Christmas really planted a seed in my heart. Like, okay, I see, Jesus being worshipped, in the nativity, blah, blah, regardless of your views about Christmas, it really planted a seed in my heart towards Jesus. Wow. So that was pretty neat.
Good to know. Amazing.
So Doug, thank you so
well. Yeah, I just one last comment here, Doug, and you interject. I know we're all kind of talking. This is exactly what we vowed not to do, but we hope that we'll do another show. At least maybe you have 9 people here that'll all definitely want to have you on their shows and just get your word out. I want to get your books in these front storefronts here for the Christians that come in for Bible studies and little church meetings here. Everybody needs to look at the material that you guys have made, as far as it's like we can win souls. And also for me personally, getting into this topic, it just gave a lot of oxygen. And like you said, it complements the faith that we already carry as Christians. But I'd also like to interject that we can also use this material to reach out to new believers and people that maybe come from Buddhist backgrounds. I spent 20 years in Asia off and on. I take jabs at Geraldine because she's Thai and so much more free than like all the Chinese
on the
and Japanese
outside.
and people like in Taiwan. Like they're very rigid. And then I went to Thailand and I'm like, there's people dancing on tables here. There's like craziness. Like Thai are crazy. And but their Buddhism in Taiwan is much more free. So you guys have a weird paradox in Thailand. This is a missionary operation, guys. This is a missionary operation. Look at doug-van-dorn.com, buy his books, get his podcasts in everybody's
It used to be
feeds.
Doug. It's Douglas now because I lost my stupid name and lost all that clout on the internet. So
okay, Douglas Van Dorn. Douglas,
it had to be my full name.
DOUGLAS Van VAN Dorn DORN.com. And also link to the church website there for a lot of other material that you can use and share. rbcnc.com. We're talking major mega shifts. This isn't just some little fad that Michael Heiser and friends said. This is like shifting everything, and it could even bring unity to many different branches of Christianity. Like a lot of people. I go on TikTok, Nick. I see Derek Prince, then I see Michael Heiser, then I see, some other random preachers and just a bunch of new Christians. And they're eating this stuff up and combining orthodoxy with normal Protestant Christian Bible studies and Michael Heiser talk. So this is a revolution. We can't really define it yet, but thank you so much for your time. If you want to share anything on top of all those annoying speaking over you comments, is there anything that you'd like to share?
No, you said, you gave the information out, so that's about all.
Yay. Thank you so much, Pastor Douglas.
I want to come to your church. Can people just show up at your church? Is it like you can just come in
trip
to
Colorado?
Yeah. Out in Colorado, right next to Rocky Mountain National Park.
Okay. All right. Anybody in the area, that's your new Mecca. So, all right.
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you very much, Doug.
Yeah, glad to be a part of your show here tonight, guys. Thanks for contacting me.
Thank you so much for listening to the Strange O'Clock podcast with Michael and Jerry, with our special guest, Pastor Douglas Van Dorn. You can check out his website at douglasvandorn.com. Also, we have other Christian podcast friends with us, such as Brandon Spain and Lindsay Waters with the Unrefined Podcast. We also have Enoch Putris with the rundown of our reality on Rumble. You can check out his videos. We've got Kenny C with The Rock with Kenny C, and Paul, who's a newcomer. And of course, we've got Michael, and he has his own podcast on Spreaker and Apple Podcasts, which is Spirit Wars. And my personal podcast is Amazing Grace Radio. And you can find me on Spreaker as well as Apple Podcasts and such. So if you could take the time out to leave a good review, we'd greatly appreciate it. We'd love to hear from you. You can feel free to email us at strangeoclock@yahoo.com. That's STRANGEOCLOCK@yahoo.com. And if you could take the time to send us an email if you'd like to be a guest on our show, or if you have any suggestions or any topics for consideration for us to talk about next time. And also, if you would like to support the show, since we do put a lot of time and energy into it, if you could please send any donation of any amount to tigergirlforgod@yahoo.com via PayPal. Again, that's THAIGIRL@yahoo.com. We would greatly appreciate it. God bless you, and have a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening wherever you are at in the world.